Now let's see how we will actually use an array in Java. So I've created a program here which I'm calling arrays, and I'm going to make a couple of arrays in here. Alright, to start off with, let's make an array of type integer. Now in Java you will declare an integer type array using int, but followed by square brackets, and we'll give this array a name. We'll call it student marks is equal to new int 5. Now what is this? When we're saying new int, where the new keyword creates a new instance of an array, and the int 5 says that this array is going to have 5 integers. Now this is one of the limitations of arrays. Arrays are static in their size. Once you declare an array with 5 elements, that's it. That array will remain with the 5 elements forever. You cannot increase the number of elements in an array. Alright, let's populate this array. Now how do we populate the array? We reference each index in that array. So we'll say student marks item with element 0 will be assigned the mark, for example, 85%. And then we'll go down the line in the exact same manner. We'll reference the index number of each element in the array and apply a number to it, or assign a number to it. So let's do that. Copy that and paste it. And we'll change each one. Alright, you can give it a random amount. And that's how we assign values to an array. Now the question is, how do we access the values in an array? Now we'll access them in the exact same way that they were assigned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to output some of the elements of this array. For example, if I wanted to output this element, the value of this element, which is student marks 2, I simply put in the 2 in there, and that's it. So let's try compiling this code. So it's called arrays.java, checked, compiles, and I've got an error in my array. Alright, now this is a common mistake. Array index out of bounds exception 5. Now what does this mean? It simply means that I'm calling an index in that array that doesn't exist. But then the question may arise that, look, I've got an array of 5 elements and I'm assigning 5 elements. The last element here is 5. But think about it. If the first element of the array is 0, not 1, then the last element of the array will be 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 amount to 5 elements, and that's the 5 elements that we are setting here. So this is a common error that people think that, okay, this is a 5, so there's hence the last index of my array is 5. It's not true. It's actually that number minus 1. That would be the last element in your array. So if you got an array of 1,000 elements, then your last element is 999. That would be the index of it. So let's remove this line, compile the code, and run it. Okay, perfect. So I've got a 56, which corresponds to a student marks index 2. Now there was a strange thing that happened earlier when I had the array or the mistake where I was calling student marks 5. It compiled properly, but the problem arose at runtime. Now this is known as a runtime error, and runtime errors are particularly dangerous because your code will compile, but during runtime your application will crash. So this is particularly dangerous if you're creating an app for the production environment. So everything will compile on your side, and the moment you deploy it to the user and the user tries to use it, tries to run it, then it can crash, and that's the worst type of crash that you can have, where it crashes on the side of the user. Okay, let's continue. So now we've created an integer array. Let's create a string array. String, we'll call this one student names, and we'll also give it 5 elements. All right, and we'll populate student names just as we populated the student marks array. All right, so that's how you will populate a string array, in the exact same way that you would populate an integer array, with the exception that you will place the strings within double quotes. So let's copy this. Right, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I put in 1 extra. All right, let's change the array indexes now. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so we have an array of type string with student names, and we have an array of type integer with student marks. Now the question is, what if I wanted to output all of the elements in an array? Not just one by one like I did here, but output them all at once. Do I have to call each element in the array? What if I've got an array of 1,000 items? That means I have to put 1,000 lines of code to output the elements of the array. Clearly that's not going to work. That's just going to be too long and tedious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a loop. Now a for loop will allow me to iterate through my entire array. I'm going to show you how that's done. So we start off with a for loop. Start off at 0. Alright. Counter is less than equal to what? We need to count from 0 up till the size of this array. So how do we get the size of an array? Obviously we know that this array has 5 elements, but is there some automated way of getting the size of an array? Yes, there is. So we're going to use studentmarks.size, and that's how we get the size of the array. So this will return 5, and then we increment counter. All right, and then we're going to system out the marks. Now this is how we're going to do it. Student marks So what do I put in there? What do I put between the square brackets? I'll put in the current value of counter. Alright, but how will this work now? Now this will work in this way. When we encounter the loop for the first time, the value of counter is set to 0 and we go into the loop. Now think of the value of counter, it's 0. So we system out print line student marks with the index 0. We go back. Now student marks, or the counter is incremented, counter plus plus, that will give us 1. So we go into the loop, system out print line student marks 1. So then it will output the mark 74. And in the same way we go back, it becomes 2. So we're going to output student marks with the array index 2, which is 56, right through till the end of the loop. Okay, let's compile this code. Hope there's no errors. It's not finding the size. I think it's length size is for linked lists and length is for arrays. And let's run this. Okay, so you can see what's happening here. It's outputting the elements of my array, but it also output a runtime error, exception in thread main, java.lang.array index out of bounds exception. Again, I'm encountering the same problem. What's happened here is my loop indexed item 5 in the array and there is no item 5 in the array. Let's try and figure out why that was the case. Student marks.length is 5. Even though the last index is 4, the length of the array is 5. So now what I need to do is to modify my code so that it counts not up to and equal to 5, but up to just below 5. So in other words, now that I've put a less than and I remove the equal to sign, this loop is going to count from 0 to 4. As long as the item counter is less than 5, it will continue going in the loop. The instance that counter becomes 5, the loop will stop and I won't get my array index out of bounds error. So let's recompile that code to test it. And let's run it now. Okay, so it's output all the elements in my array. Now, where does this 56 come from? The 56, not to confuse it, it comes from this line here. Let's put in the line numbers. It comes from line 17. So now what we can do is, if I don't want that 56 to appear, I can simply delete this line, or for the time being, I'll comment it out. To comment out a line of code in Java, you simply use the slash, the forward slash, 2 forward slashes. Now this will make the line invisible to the Java compiler. Let's try that again. Alright, so there we go, 85, 74, 56, 43, 98, just as we have it here. Now what if we wanted to output the name of the student next to each mark? Then that would be simple to do. What we'll do is we'll call student names with the array index, and then we'll call student marks, and we'll concatenate the two strings together. So let's see how we'll do that. Student name Alright, so look what we've done. We've put student names of counter. So the counter in each case will be the same. The value of counter, when you start the loop, it'll be 0, 0. So what's going to happen is it's going to output Tom and 85. And the next time it goes into the loop, the value of counter will be 1. So it'll output student 1, which is Tim, and mark 1, which is 74. Let's test this code. Perfect. So now we've created arrays and we've iterated through our arrays.